Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing the 7Hz Salnotes Zero IEMs. They are a $20 set from a company that also makes the Timeless, which has been a very well received IEM. Today we're going to be going over the build quality, the tips that I used, the source that I used. In a minute we'll get to my quick impressions of what I thought of them if you don't want to see the whole in-depth comparison. And then after that we'll get into the comparisons against the Moondrop CHU, the CCA CRA, the Moondrop Quarks, the Titan S, and then basically what you get versus something like a more expensive set, $200 set like the Ikko OH10. So I appreciate you watching, and welcome to the video. Okay, these are the Salnotes Zero IEMs. When I was looking at the packaging, they have a metallic kind of feel to them. They look more, or they feel more plasticky in person, but not like really in a bad way. They don't feel super cheap, and they'll probably last you a while. They don't feel a whole lot different than the CCA IEMs, but they feel slightly better made in the fact that, like, if you just see somebody walking around with these, they probably look more like metal than they do plastic. As you can see, so this cable that it comes with is very plasticky feeling, almost like the feeling you'd get of something like a hard case that you gotta cut open to get to something inside that doesn't have you can't open, like a plastic casing. But it feels solid. Once it's on your head, you don't notice it. And what's nice is that it doesn't spring out, it doesn't go everywhere, it doesn't go crazy, it just kind of does its thing. This version, I don't think they make one that comes with a microphone, which was slightly a downer for me, because I like sometimes to just wear these, and then if I get a phone call, be able to use it that way. But so that's all I'm going to say about the build quality of it. So the first thing that I need to talk about with these specifically is the tip situation. So if you're like me and you've got large ear canals, these, let's see if I can find a space, I'll just dump these out. All right, and still make sure it's in the shot here. All right, so you see all these, it just feels like a pile of random tips, honestly. Most of them are about the same size. They don't really feel distinctive in shape, or that there's any rhyme or reason. I think the red ones are the ones that come with them. Here, and I'll stack these all up so we can see all the different types together. But I tried anything that even looked like a reasonable size, and I couldn't get a good seal with anything. For me, when I use the tips that actually come with the box, these sounded like really bad IEMs. I didn't get any bass out of them, and they sounded shrill. And I spent some time, I was about to give up on these, and then I remembered, how things can be for me in tips. So I started trying some different ones. So I tried some different tips with these after realizing none of these were going to work for me. So I haven't heard a lot of other people complain about these tips, but if you have the kind of ear canals I do, where you need to have bigger tips, you may need to immediately look at third-party ones, because that made all the difference in the world to me. So keeping it moving, what I ended up coming up with is, for me, I use the Spin Fits. They almost always are my favorites, and I think they're called the CP100 Plus. I'll leave a link in the description. And for me, if you see here, so my ear canals are slightly different sizes, but usually that doesn't make a huge difference. These seem to be very picky in the sense that, like, if I put on tips that were too big and I had a shallow insert, it didn't sound good either. I got it started to get kind of boomy, and I lost some resolution. Where if they were too small, I didn't get any bass at all. So I had to use two different size tips in order to get the kind of seal and the kind of sound that I wanted. But after that, it sounded great. So I'll just encourage you, if you use these and they don't sound good, to start with checking your tips and making sure you're getting the right insertion depth and making sure that you're getting a good seal. I don't know that these are magical tips other than they fit my ears really well. They're a little bit tacky, so they kind of stick, and I think that helps with the seal. Not in a way where it like leaves gunk on your ears, but they're just slightly tacky, where they don't slide as much as they do, just kind of, they have a little bit of friction to them. And so for me, I had the smaller one in my right ear and a bigger one in my left. And once I did that, I was pretty amazed at the quality of sound that I got out of them. So that's the first thing I'd say for the tip component of it. My other impression on these is, the quick takeaway is essentially the imaging on these imaging and soundstage on these is crazy for a $20 set. I honestly have not used any set out of everything that I've used that I feel like has a better sense of soundstage and layering and of precise imaging of where everything is. I'll show you later. I used the OH10 some, and I was surprised that they couldn't. Now they can give you more clarity and detail and it sounds better, but in sense of actually knowing where something is and a sense of general depth and size, once I got the tips right on these, it was pretty amazing. And I'll tell you, if you want to test for yourself, put on the Hotel California by the Eagles off of their Hell Freezes Over album. And in that, you can hear the soundstage of guitars, things like that, but you can also hear the crowd. And on these, out of everything that I tested here, are the only ones that really give you a real sense of like, oh, well, the bass is right here, the guitar is kind of over here, and the crowd is over here. Like, really gives you a sense of layering and separation in the imaging, and it was pretty amazing. And so imaging, these are amazing, and that also goes into the gaming performance. So if you want to use these for gaming, these are some of the best gaming IEMs that I've used based on really gaming performance just comes down to imaging and soundstage, because you need to know where everything is and how far that it is away from you and be able to hear with enough detail to tell where it is. Now, the one downside with these is that if something gets really busy, like say you're listening to music that just has a ton going on, and say if it's heavy metal and you had the drummer going and the bassist and the guitar and the vocals, and they're all going a million miles an hour and they're all on top of each other, it can get a little bit lost in the shuffle. But for the most part, if you just have a few things and they're staying in their lane, you get really good instrument separation. And in my experience in gaming, this is pretty clear where you've got, you get some booms, you get some, hey, over here, whatever, you get a little bit of talk on top of it, but everything is pretty much staying in its lane. These do really well for gaming, not only for 20, but just in general. They're excellent gaming IEMs, and I recommend them for anybody that needed an inexpensive set to do gaming with. The only downside to it is that it doesn't have a mic, but you could easily use a different set of cables, because this is just a standard. I mean, as far as I can tell, somebody chime in if this isn't true, but as far as I can tell, there's just a standard 2-pin. So you could use a $13. I'll leave a link to this in the description as well. There's a $13 set of 2-pin cables that I've used that come with a mic that work great. On Amazon, they're only like $13. So if you wanted to do something like that, you definitely could. You could just replace the cable later, or you can just use a separate mic if you've already got something like that. I've done a video on how to just add a separate mic to your setup if you wanted to do it that way. Okay, so we talked about the soundstage, we talked about imaging. The detail level on these is good in the same sense. If you've used the 560S Sennheiser headphones, it's similar in the sense that you get detail in the sense that it's very clear, so it doesn't clear and almost harsh. And that's why it reminds me of the 560. But with that, you get a lot of clarity, and you're not going to get like the most minute details. This isn't like a crazy you heard a mouse fart in the studio, but it it's not muddy at all once you get your tips right. So you get excellent clarity, and unless you're like a super detail head where the only thing you care about is hearing the very smallest detail in a track, it's got plenty of detail. And some of the detail for me comes down to when you have that separation of imaging and you got the separation of instruments like this does, where you have a clear sound stage and you have a separation of instruments and of stage. Some of the details come out just because everything doesn't sound like it's on top of each other. Again, the caveat to that is if you have a million things going on, this driver has a little bit of trouble keeping up with it. But as long as you're listening to fairly clean songs that don't have, that aren't incredibly busy, this keeps up just fine. So the bass on this, I found that this had a little bit more bass than the Moondrop CHUs. You do get a little bit more punch to it. But it's not going to be incredibly resolving. Like when it hits super deep notes, it's not going to give you a lot of nuance to that. The bass is not the star of the show in these. They just give you enough for it to be fun. So if you're listening to, say, even like EDM or something, it'll give you some good punch. Like I listen to some 90s hip hop. This, like, if you move over to hip hop, this is not going to fall apart on you. And you can still listen to it, still be fun. Something with a lot of bass will still work, but that's not really what these are built for, or at least what they're best for, in my opinion. I think what they're best for is anything that has, like real bands that have different. I don't mean to make fun of rap or EDM. I'm just saying, like a band that has actual instruments, actual different things, more than just bass and vocals going on. This is going to excel at it. This is not a set that you just get if you just want bass. I'll be talking, there's another Zero set that I'll be talking about soon, which is just the kick you bass. It's like having a sub in the trunk of your car. That's just really good, and that's the Critical Zeros. But I'm not going to be talking about them in this video because they're not really in the same lane or at the same price point. But again, we're talking about $20 sets here. So the bass is pretty good, but it does its job, but it's not going to be the star of the show. The mids are really good on these in the sense you get excellent clarity, you get excellent detail. It's kind of out front and center, again, with the tips that I used. The one downside with the mids is that if somebody really hits a note hard and you start getting into that upper mids, that shouty area, these get shouty. So you can get a little bit of a spike and sharpness on those higher end songs. Like, for instance, who is it? I was listening to California by Joni Mitchell, and when you listen to that, and she's got a lot of like really high, those mid highs that she gets into on it, and it kind of hurts your brains listening to it with this set. So if you don't want to EQ it and you're listening to kind of powerhouse singers that really hit high notes that are kind of hard and start to get into that upper range of mids that can be bothersome, just know that you're going to get clarity and you're going to get clean vocals with this, but you also are going to get a bit of shoutiness in the upper mids. And then treble isn't really the star of the show, I feel like, either, but like it's clearly represented. And I'll listen to tracks that just have Deliverance by Thomas. I'll leave the detail after I get done with the video here, but I like to listen to treble on that track because there's basically like this tinkle that goes throughout the track, and on some sets it basically loses it all together and you can't really hear the detail of the treble with the rest of the music going on. But with these, you really don't have that issue. You are able to continue to hear the treble, and again, the treble isn't the star of the show, but it does a competent job, kind of like what it does with the bass as well. So and we're talking about a $20 set. So that's kind of the overview of it. Very impressed. I think this would be money well spent. You may have to invest in some different tips if you don't want to, or if you're having issues with the seal or it's just not sounding right. And this is a no-brainer. I would just pick them up because these do certain things better than like $150, $200 sets that I've had, and those things are specifically instrument separation and soundstage. Once you get your tips right, are incredible on these. But a lot of people too. So now we're going to move on to the comparisons here. So these are the CHUs, and I put all these on the table so everybody can see. I'm not just talking from memory. I spent probably the better part of a day listening back and forth, A/B testing between different ones, listening to different tracks to make sure that what I said was true, because I know for a lot of people, for a lot of us, this is just a hobby and you can buy whatever. But for some people, when you buy these, this might be the only set that you buy for the year. This might be something that you get hundreds and hundreds of hours of use out of. So I want to take it seriously, even though these are in the budget area, that you get the best advice that you can. It's not just buy it, but like, where are these in comparison to everything else? So the first thing people want to know about is the CHUs. So I did a lot of A/B testing, probably the most between the CHU and the zeros, and the short answer is that I think the zeros are pretty clearly the winner because of, you get the cable that can be separated from it. You don't have the janky ear hooks and the crappy cable on it. That's one of the things that puts us over the top. The CHU does not have incredible imaging or soundstage, and it does not have as much bass. There's not such a sense of instrument separation. It does not have the level of detail or clarity, so it misses out on a lot of what the zeros have, in my opinion. But the one thing it does have going for it is that this is a more, I'd say this is a more pleasant, like easy to listen to. The tuning is like, and again, if you go back and watch my video on these, I had to get the tips right. On these as well, I do not like them with the spring tips, but once you put the spin fits in them, they become, I'd say, a little softer, a little bit more laid back. I'd almost say even easier to listen to. Like, they're kind of like on a Sunday, you want to kick back and listen to and just chill with some laid back music, something like Wilco, something like that, and you want to relax. You're not like, oh, I need all of it, give me you just want to relax and chill. These are like your loafers in comparison to the zeros here. So they have their place still, and I really enjoy them more for certain things. But if you're kind of going head to head, if you list out all the features, they don't really compete, in my opinion, because again, that soundstage, that imaging, the detail. But once you add the tips to it, you don't have nearly as much sense of shout in your vocals. They're very pleasant to listen to. It's just, if you're kind of ticking the features off, you feel like it doesn't quite measure up. But this is more of like check boxes and details and like, oh, it does this and it does this and it does this. But if you're like 3/4 paying attention and you just want something enjoyable to put in your ears and you want to change the tips and you just sit back and relax and listen to music, and you're not so worried about every detail of soundstage and imaging and detail of vocals and everything else, this could still be the set for you if those things aren't as important to you. Okay, so then we're going to move on to the Quarks. The Quarks, the reason I bring these up is that these are another value option that are under $15, but I kind of have a caveat for you here with these as well. So the Quarks, to just say, head to head, they don't really compete with the zeros. The zeros are, again, imaging, soundstage that is like, some $200 sets don't even compete with it on that. They've got better detail, better clarity, all that stuff. But there's still a sense of fatigue and just you kind of lose a little bit of feeling of laid back and enjoyability with these due to it's more like it's trying to do things technically, and it's willing to lose a little bit of the relax and the fun factor, and just not even fun. Like, these are fun, but they just take themselves a little bit more seriously, it feels like. Where the Quarks, and these are, you can just kind of take these and just pop them in your ear. They're very easy to you don't have to loop them around your ear at all. So you just pop them in. So you can see these are not the tips that come with them, funny enough. So Moondrop sends out the spring tips with the CHU, with the CHU, but they do not send it on the Quarks. So these are actually the tips for me that came with the CHUs. And the reason I did this is that the Quarks, with their stock tuning and with the stock tips that come with them, they're pretty neutral, but they give you a slightly warm bass. So it feels, the bass feels like it's just slightly accentuated, and then the mids are slightly veiled feeling, and there's just a left, right, middle, and it's just it's pleasant, but it's really basic and simple. Where once you put spring tips on them, and for me, so these are large spring tips, and usually I use large tips in general, but for me, the spring tips run a little bit small. So for me, the large ones here, I would actually normally use an extra large in a different tip, if that makes sense, because these run a little bit small. So when I put these in, I have to do a little bit deeper insertion depth with them. But once you do that, the Quarks are really interesting in that they're kind of like a mini, like if you need an on-the-go editing setup, or just, hey, I just want to hear the detail and I don't want a lot of extra bass or treble. I don't want piercing treble in my ears. I don't want boomy bass. I just, either I've got an audio clip to edit, or I've got I want to listen to music and just the simple, and it's not completely unfun, but it's just clean, clear, basic, and without a lot of frills. These actually are really good for that. So if you wanted an inexpensive way for like editing, or you just like a more neutral presentation, if you buy some spring tips, and again, but that would add $15 to these, so you're more around the $30 range, but you just want something simple and clean and clear, and you don't care as much about soundstage and imaging. You just want easy to listen to, so it's crispy and clean, but it's not fatiguing, and it's just kind of left, right, middle, but it just kind of does the job. These are still an excellent option. Or if you buy the bigger ones, like for me, again, normally I use a larger ear tip. I went with an extra large spring tip. Once you do that, then you start getting back, you get a boomy bass, and not even boomy, but just, it feels more like starts to feel more like a traditional V-shaped IEM, more like a CRA plus, or just all the ARIA kind of basically type of tuning, or the T3 plus, where it's slightly veiled in the mids, but the bass is kicking in, but it's kind of bleeding over into the mids a little bit. But this is the reason I brought it here is that this is a really unique sounding IEM once you add the spring tips to it. And for certain people, I think it'd be right up their alley, and nobody's really talking about this one anymore. And it's very inexpensive, for $10, $13, something like that, you can get a pair of these, and they sound great. And I actually like the cable on these a lot better than I like the ones on the CHU. So going back to kind of in the past, I'm sure some of you have seen the videos. I've always been a champion of the CCA CRAs. These are $15 IEMs that were excellent, a few months ago. So I kind of wanted to see how they stack up, and did some A/B testing against the zeros. And I was very surprised that I knew the zeros were good, but I was kind of always a fanboy of these. But when I started listening to the CCA CRA, I realize now they do almost nothing better than the zeros. Like, they're really outclassed in just about every way that you can imagine. In my memory, the treble led to really good detail and clarity, and you got all kinds of details on the tracks and like excellent bass. But when I went from the zero to the CRA, I realized on these, the mids are significantly pushed back, so that would be the only appeal to it. Like, if you're not a mids guy and you just want to have, you want to have bass, more laid back vocals, and be able to have some sparkle, like a more V-shaped signature, these might be a better bet for you. But the zeros, again, they have real soundstage, they have real imaging, where the CRAs do not. They're kind of, everything kind of gets mixed together. There's a vague sense of instrument separation and soundstage. You don't realize you're missing it until you hear something that actually has it, and then you're like, whoa, that's a huge difference, But so the bass is probably a little bit deeper and more extended on these than you get with the zeros. but it's not even close. Like, again, like, you get maybe better bass, you don't get as good mids, the treble is more pushed forward, but not necessarily better because it's not as detailed and separated. For gaming, they're not all that great because you don't get, again, that sound stage and like left, right, middle, behind you, all that stuff. You just get, kind of left, right, middle, and everything else is vague with it. You don't get as good a detail, surprisingly. Now, there might be, have like some pretty spicy trebles. So there may be certain ways that you could prove that they have better detail, but like in just traditional listening where you're just listening to music, I don't hear it because, again, I think part of how detail presents itself, once you separate things, then you can really hear more about every little detail going on with something. So even if it doesn't necessarily extend to like the somebody coughing on set or something like that, maybe you could hear that with the CRA. But in terms of practical application, where you're like, wow, I can hear, okay, the bassist is over here, the guitarist is over here, the vocalist is over here, the separation, that naturally leads to better detail, I feel like. So it gives you, it's basically better in just about every way, unless, like, if you're just listening to hip hop, you want like you want your mids pushed back and you want a little bit better bass, there might be an argument for these. But I mean, if you do different things, especially when you add in the fact that you can use this as a real gaming headset and it would do great for it, it blows the CRA out of the water now. Okay, so we got a couple more comparisons to do. One of the ones that I'd heard people talk about was versus the Titan S. Just to lay the groundwork, so the Titan S, it's a more neutrally tuned, maybe not even neutral, but like in the $80 range, you had the Aria and then you had the T3 Plus. And for me, the T3 Plus was the best in that range for a long time until I had tried out the Titan S. And then it became pretty obvious. Well, let me back up. Not only the Titan S, but once I got the fit right on my blonde BL03s, and again got the right tips and got them feeling right, I felt like those sets were kind of redundant because I didn't feel like they were even as good as the BL03 in the ways that I wanted them to be. And then the Titan gave me a different feel and a better one within that range. So when you're talking about the Aria and the T3 Plus, they both kind of present with additional bass, and the T3 Plus doesn't have quite as in your face mids, but it has better treble. Anyway, they're kind of neck and neck. But when I got the Titan S, it does not have, I usually like a heavier bass set, but what I loved about the Titan S is that it gives you a more detailed, it gives you a better balanced presentation of all the instruments. You get good instrument separation, everything feels balanced. It's not like the Aria where you can barely hear the treble depending on the track sometimes, or the bass is extended. So if you listen to a track on the Titan S that has deep sub bass, it will do a competent, clean, good job of presenting that to you, even though it's not a bass centered set. It's basically, it's like, I view it like it's a professional what it does. It's not peacocking around, but when it needs to do something, it can do it. But it basically just presents it to you in a clean, clear way, but also it adds just enough color to make things fun. So it gives you good instrument separation. It gives you excellent, it feels more like an accurate bass response. It doesn't feel bloated and boomy. Like it can give you really good sub bass, but it never feels boomy or overextended. It just feels like the way that the track was created, that's how it's presenting it. And it gives you good instrument separation, but also the instruments are the only word I can think of to say is there's a sense of color to them. And again, so with these, I do not use spin fits. I really like the tips. There's a few different sets of tips that come with them. I ended up using the red ones. And these are, the one thing these really do have going for them too, if you look at it, these are just beautifully made. You see, I think these are open back, like that's got to be like a little vent for it. This is all metal. It's got the cyberpunk kind of feel to it. The colors are really cool. The cable is nice for this range, so it's got excellent build quality for an $80 headset or $80 IEM as well. But it does not have excellent soundstage in imaging. It does have, you get a sense of separation, or at least I do with the instruments, but you don't get a great sense of depth and weight. It's just kind of like they're just kind of chopped up, and you can hear them separately, but it doesn't really present them as like, oh, one's way over here, one's over here, one's behind you, that kind of thing. It feels more like a semicircle when it presents it. So you get good imaging in the sense that it's separated but not specific on where it is on the stage. At least that's how I hear it. You don't really get a sense of sound stage. It's just like a semicircle. The details are pretty good in the sense that, kind of like what I talked about before, when you separate things, you're going to naturally hear the detail better because they're not overlapping each other. Like, you tend to hear everything pretty well. It's got an excellent tone and timbre and clarity. Like, you feel like all that stuff is really good. The bass, again, is not overextended, but it does sound very good, but it doesn't overdo it. But anything you need it to do, like if you listen to EDM and it's got some sub bass, you'll be amazed. It'll just kick in and be like, whoa, where'd that come from? It's because not every track, it's not overextending it. It feels like more true to neutral on the bass side. And I really enjoy the way mids and treble are presented. It just kind of feels like the mids are a little bit more forward, take a little bit more of the stage, but in general it feels just like a more neutrally tuned set with slightly forward mids, and you know that they add a little bit of color. Somehow it feels clearer, but also a better sense of color and note depth at the same time on some of the instruments, and that's what made me fall in love with it. It's like, wow, it feels clearer and more accurate, but also with a little bit more color to it, if that makes any sense. So I really like this set, but a lot of people have said that it sounds very similar to the Zeros here. So I put them back and back and back and back, and went back and forth with them, and I'd still say that the Titan S has things that it's better at. Again, that sense of, so the Zeros have, like I talked about before, a little bit more sense of like a clarity, but it's more, some of the clarity feels like it was obtained by putting a little bit of harshness into the mids. So you have a slight glare in the upper mids. There's a slight sense of harshness. It's not overwhelming, but it's like that's how they got to that tuning, and you get some of these amazing things with this, is a slight sense of a lack of character or flatness, thinness, a metallic edge, whatever you want to call it. It feels just a little bit sharp. It's not like as rounded around the edges as maybe you might like. Where what the Titan does well is, like I said, being proficient in the way that it's showing you everything, but at the same time doing it in a way that is not offensive to your ears. It's very clean and clear, but also has a pleasant, color to it. Where the Zeros present it in a little bit more of a harsh way, but basically accomplish the same thing. But what I was really surprised about is that if you put these head to head, the Zero by far have better imaging and better soundstage than the Titan S, because again, the Titan S is just kind of like a semicircle, where the Zeros have like a real sense of stage. Again, going back to the Hotel California, you can hear like, okay, the drums right here, the guitarist is right here, and the crowd's out here, where you only slightly get that sense with the Titan S. I could not ever get that real big sense of separation. Now, I'm sure that on busier tracks, the Titan S will do better than the Zeros, but it just shows that we're even having this conversation and meriting the pros and cons of these. Like if separation, detail, imaging, soundstage is more important to you, you may actually like these better than the Titan S. If a little bit more laid back, the lushness of the music, if that's more your thing, then the Titan S might be your deal. But the thing is, this is $80 and this is $20 here. So that's pretty amazing that we're even having that conversation. And the final thing, just for giggles, I put together, so I started listening to the OH10s, and it's, some of the things I said about the Titan S apply to these as well. I mean, the build quality is obviously way better. These are super nice. They've got nice heavy shells that they come in. When you pop them in their ears, you get, again, kind of like the Titan S in the sense of you get note weight and clarity and speed, and you get all those things that it doesn't feel like it has to compromise. Where the zeros for me do not. It feels like they had to tune it in a way where they're kind of hoping the track doesn't get too busy, and they kind of tuned it a little harsher so you get more clarity, soundstage detail, all those things. And it's not super harsh. It's just in comparison, you will hear that. But I could listen to this for an hour straight and not have any issue with it. I want to be clear about that. It's not bad. But when you do the soundstage test for these two again, like the zeros still win. That's why I'm saying I don't think that I've used an IEM, and I haven't used anything over the $200 range. So the only other ones as expensive as these are the S12s that I've used. But I have not heard anything that images as well as these. Maybe the VR 3000s that I have, but I didn't think to put those against these in terms of imaging. But those are an $80 pair of IEMs that are made specifically for gaming. That's all that they're made for, and they don't sound good for music. So even the idea that they would be in the same range with these is pretty incredible. So the OH10 are like better in just about every way. They do almost everything that these can do, and they do it better. You get the clarity and cleanness, and you get the note weight and the bass, and you get, it's basically better in almost everything other than its imaging and soundstage capability. And if you're just looking at the mids, it might hang in there unless then you factor in the kind of glare that you get on the zero, and it wouldn't quite do it. But we're talking a $20 set versus like a $180 set. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. I just kind of went on about everything that I could think of, but the bottom line is that this is an incredible value at $20. It blows away old champions out of the water. Like the CCA CRA, I don't even think is something I would bring up anymore. The CHUs are still an option, but I view these like a comfortable pair of shoes versus these are like your running shoes. Maybe that's the best way to put it, something like that. And then the CCA CRA, or the Moondrop Quarks here, they kind of, to me, I feel like they have a spot in everything. Like if I can only keep a few IEMs, these might be one of them. I don't know, maybe not. I could always buy the other later for value. But anyway, stay with me. So the reason I keep these around and I think they have a lot of value is they're really cheap. So if you lose them, it's not the end of the world. They can just pop in your ears. You don't have to loop them around your ears. And when you get the right tips on them, they give you something that I haven't experienced in any other IEMs that are basically a neutral presentation with good clarity and detail. Unless you're trying to hear, mouse farts in your studio, these would do just fine in terms of like I've used these to edit, YouTube videos that I create, things like that, and they do a great job for that. There's no reason they wouldn't, because again, they're not adding a ton of extra boom in the bass, and they're not killing your ears with treble. It's, to my ears, they feel like what I consider neutral to be, and that's a nice thing to have as an actual neutral set, especially if you can do it for, once you buy these tips, you get 3 sets of tips for $15. So once you get past that, if you ever had to replace these, you're talking like $13 to replace them with another unit. And I like too, they've got a mic with them, so you can pop one in your ear, take the other one out of your ear, make phone calls with them and stuff too. It's kind of like an audiophile stethoscope. They're just kind of nice to have around. So, I think I covered everything. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much for all the subs. It's really cool to watch. We're past 200 now and went straight to, 220 or 230 or whatever it is. And it really encourages me to continue to make these. And I hope that you see the value that I'm putting in this is that, I'm probably never going to make a career out of doing anything like this. But for me, this is a personal journey for me to figure out what makes sense to spend money on and what doesn't for audio. With all the hours that we put into listening, I think it's important to figure out where the value is in hi-fi and where it isn't, and what makes sense to spend on. And obviously it's fun. But beyond that, like, people deserve the truth on what they should actually be spending money on and what makes a difference and what isn't. It feels like there's so much snake oil in this industry, and I hope that I add a little bit of value to you, just trying to give you honest opinions on what I'm hearing. And there's a lot of exciting things happening in the industry. I honestly feel like these zeros sound better than when I was First looking at stuff, the Arias and the T3 Plus kind of blew everything out of the water. In a lot of ways, these are a lot better than those. So the technology is coming a long way, and it's a really exciting time to be part of this hobby. So I appreciate you watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, leave comments below. I appreciate everybody that watches, and if there's any questions that you have or any ways I can be helpful, please let me know. Thank you.